Dismissed on my own birthday with the harsh buzz of fluorescent lights overhead, it felt like the universe's cruel joke. Merritt, 58, retired accountant, still clutched the company ID badge he never expected to use this way. Ever been blindsided by someone you thought you knew? What would you do if your biggest critic became your next challenge? My daughter-in-law told me to go to a nursing home, but I ended up becoming their landlord instead. Those words echoed inside my head like the clang of a distant bell, ominous and impossible to ignore. Standing on the worn concrete steps of the house I'd called home for nearly 4 decades, I gripped the old brass key in my hand, feeling its familiar coolness and weight heavier somehow than I remembered. It wasn't just a key, it was a link to my past, a symbol of everything at stake, and a silent challenge to what lay ahead. The spring morning in Madison, Wisconsin was chilly but gentle. The kind of early spring day when the last traces of winter still cling to the edges of sidewalks and the scent of damp earth lingers in the air. The street was quiet, lined with aging maple trees, whose buds were just beginning to swell, promising new life, but also reminding me how time moves on whether we're ready or not. I paused at the door and inhaled deeply. The subtle aroma of weathered wood and faint traces of coffee still lingering inside. The house looked unchanged on the outside, but the silence inside was different, heavier, almost expectant. My son Thomas was sitting on the worn sofa, looking torn between his wife's words and his own loyalties. His eyes met mine briefly, full of awkward sympathy, but careful not to upset the fragile balance. Karen, my daughter-in-law, stood near the window, arms crossed tightly, her gaze sharp and unyielding. She was younger than me by at least 20 years, always confident, but today her voice had an edge sharper than usual. "Dad, you need to think about what's best for all of us. Maybe it's time to consider a nursing home," she said. Her tone cool and dismissive, as if she were delivering an inconvenient fact, rather than breaking my heart. I swallowed hard. The sting of her words was worse than any physical blow I'd ever taken. To be told by family no less that you're an inconvenience, that you no longer belong where you once did. It's a blow that shakes the very foundation of one's identity. But I said nothing. Instead, I looked down at the brass key in my hand, its smooth surface a reminder of better days. Later, sitting at the kitchen table, I turned the key over slowly, feeling the grooves worn down by decades of use. It belonged to my late father, a man who taught me the value of resilience and quiet dignity. The kitchen smelled faintly of the coffee I'd brewed hours earlier, but had long since gone cold. I absent-mindedly traced a crack in the wooden table, thinking about how small things sometimes bear the greatest weight. Dinner was a tense, silent affair. The clatter of silverware and the occasional creak of chairs were the only sounds in the room. Karen's gaze never met mine, and Thomas seemed stuck somewhere between wanting to speak up and fearing the storm that might follow. I caught a glimpse of Karen's smirk, half triumphant, half impatient, as if this family drama were just another game she was winning. I looked out the window at the maples outside, their branches bare, but for the promise of leaves to come. It struck me how, like those trees, families go through cycles, growth, dormancy, storms, and eventual renewal. Maybe I thought this was just the winter before my own spring. As the evening wore on, I found myself clutching the brass key tighter, the metal cool against my palm, but grounding me. I wouldn't give up this house, not without a fight. It was my father's legacy, my home, and the last tangible link to a life I wasn't ready to let go. Then my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced down to see a text from Karen, a cold, formal eviction notice attached as a PDF. The message was clear and unforgiving: vacate the property or face legal consequences. I set the phone down slowly, the weight of the key still heavy in my hand. A part of me wanted to give in to avoid the conflict, but the other part, quiet, determined, knew this was only the beginning. I took a deep breath, tasting the sharp tang of resolve mingled with sadness. The fight for my home, for my dignity, was just getting started. The eviction notice lay flat on my kitchen table, the crisp edges of the paper almost mocking me. Its words were cold and final, but instead of breaking me, they sparked something else, a challenge I was quietly ready to meet. I stared at it for a long moment, the late morning sun filtering through the blinds and casting thin stripes across the surface. The room felt both familiar and foreign, like stepping into a memory that's been slightly altered. Nearby my favorite coffee cup sat abandoned, a small, almost invisible crack running along its rim. It was the kind of detail most people wouldn't notice, a tiny imperfection in an otherwise reliable companion. But to me, it symbolized something deeper. Just like that cup, my life felt slightly cracked, but far from broken. It was a subtle reminder that things may not be perfect, but they still held together with enough care and persistence. I sighed and pushed the eviction notice aside, turning my attention to the cluttered desk in my home office. The room was a jumble of papers, faded photographs, and stacks of unopened mail. A chaotic testament to years of quiet retirement and postponed tasks. Sunlight streamed through the window, dust motes dancing lazily in the beams. It was here, amidst the disorder, that I began to gather the pieces of my defense. My fingers trembled slightly as I sifted through old insurance policies, mortgage statements, and assorted legal documents. Each paper carried the weight of years, some yellowed and brittle, others surprisingly crisp. I carefully sorted them into piles, my mind racing to piece together a coherent argument against the impending eviction. The phone rang suddenly, startling me. I glanced at the screen and recognized the numbers immediately. It was Frank, an old college friend who had become a lawyer, a mentor figure I hadn't spoken to in years. Our conversations had always been candid, grounded in mutual respect and a shared sense of justice. Hearing his voice now was a small comfort in the growing storm. "Frank, thanks for calling back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm in a bit of a bind." He chuckled softly, his tone warm but serious. "Merritt, I've read the notice you sent me. This isn't going to be easy, but you've got a solid case if we can get the right documents together. Let's meet soon and go over everything." I felt a flicker of hope. Having someone with legal expertise in my corner was exactly what I needed. Frank's guidance would be crucial as I navigated the complexities ahead. Later that day, my son Thomas stopped by. His visits had become infrequent and awkward, caught as he was between loyalty to his wife and sympathy for his father. We sat in the living room, the air thick with unsaid words. Thomas looked tired, his eyes reflecting the strain of trying to keep peace in a family slowly fracturing under pressure. "I don't want this to tear us apart, Dad," he said quietly, his voice heavy with emotion. "But Karen, she's firm on this. You need to consider what's best for all of us." I nodded slowly, understanding his position but unwilling to give in. This wasn't just about property. It was about dignity, legacy, and standing up for what was right. That evening, as I was tidying up the office, something caught my eye, a folded letter tucked away behind a stack of old files. The paper was worn, edges curled with age, and the handwriting unmistakably my father's. My hands trembled as I unfolded it, reading words penned years ago, but now carrying new significance. In the letter, my father spoke of the house as more than bricks and mortar. He reminded me of the sacrifices made to keep it in the family, the hopes tied to its walls, and a request that no matter what challenges came, I should hold on to it with resolve. That discovery was a turning point, a piece of hidden armor in the battle ahead. As I sat back processing the letter's weight, my phone buzzed again. Frank's voice came through firmer this time. "Merritt, I have to warn you, the fight will be complicated. They won't go quietly. Prepare yourself." The room seemed to grow colder, but I felt steadier. The path forward was daunting, but with this letter in hand and Frank's support, I was no longer facing it alone. Meeting Frank again felt strangely comforting, like stepping back into a simpler time, when life's problems seemed smaller, even if in reality the stakes had never been higher. We chose the little diner on Main Street, a place that hadn't changed much since college days. The worn vinyl booths, faded checkered floor, and muted autumn light filtering through the cracked window made it feel like a refuge from the growing storm. Outside, spring rain tapped softly against the glass, a rhythmic patter that echoed the fragile hope I clung to. Frank was already seated at our usual booth, a cup of black coffee steaming gently in front of him. His pragmatic eyes met mine, calm but alert. "Merritt," he said, "this won't be a walk in the park. but I think I found a way we can push back. We spent the first few minutes catching up. The years hadn't dulled his sharp mind or steady voice. Then, with his hands folded on the table, he dove into the details. I laid out the documents I'd collected, the insurance policies, mortgage statements, and that hidden letter from my father. Frank nodded thoughtfully, occasionally jotting down notes. "Your father's letter is a gift," he said. "It shows intent and history. If we frame this correctly, it could support a claim that you have more rights than they're willing to admit." As we spoke, Amber, the diner's waitress, approached with a warm smile. She was a fixture in this small town, someone who knew everyone and was quietly supportive of the neighborhood's struggles. She refilled our coffee without a word, but her eyes conveyed solidarity. When Frank briefly stepped away to take a call, Amber leaned in slightly. "I've seen more than a few folks go through this kind of fight," she whispered, "and it's never just about property. It's about community, about standing up. If you need anything, you know where to find us." Her words settled over me like a soft blanket. The support of the town, even quiet and cautious, was a resource I hadn't fully appreciated. Returning to the table, Frank and I began brainstorming the next steps. I pulled out a notepad and started sketching a flyer for a neighborhood meeting, a way to rally support, share information, and possibly turn the community into allies rather than bystanders. "We'll need people to back you publicly," Frank advised. "Pressure from neighbors can change the game. If enough voices join in the DIL, and her circle might think twice." Ideas flowed back and forth, legal strategy entwined with grassroots activism. It was a delicate dance, but one I was eager to learn. Then Frank paused and looked me in the eye. "There's a legal loophole that might just save you. It's a bit technical, but essentially it could give us leverage to delay any forced eviction while we build the case." Hope fluttered in my chest. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a foothold. As I reached into my jacket pocket, my hand closed tightly around the old brass key. I noticed for the first time a small chip on its edge, a subtle crack that hadn't been there before. It felt symbolic, a reminder that while my resolve remained intact, the battle would test every ounce of strength I had. The rain outside intensified, tapping faster against the cracked diner window. The glass seemed fragile, much like my own situation, but it held, and so would I. Every piece of paper I filed felt like placing another brick in the ever-growing wall that stood between me and the home I had loved my entire life. The stack on my desk, now towering in neat but intimidating piles, was a quiet testament to my determination. Each form, every letter of opposition, all those signatures from neighbors who whispered their support but feared confrontation, were like small flags planted in the soil of my fight. I was not giving up. Not now. Not ever. Outside, the winter had fully settled in. The snowfall blurred the familiar streets of Madison, covering the world in a soft white veil. The quiet was almost oppressive, but inside my home office, it was a sanctuary, a space where I could gather my scattered thoughts and muster my fading strength. The heater hummed softly, struggling against the cold that seemed to seep through the old window panes. One window in particular near my desk, always fogged with condensation and frost. I often found myself staring at that spot, as if the blurred glass mirrored the uncertainty clouding my mind. On the corner of my desk lay a faded photograph, its edges softened and curled from years of handling. It was a picture of my father and me. Both younger smiles, hesitant but full of hope. His steady eyes, lined with years of hard work, seemed to look right through me. I traced his face with my finger, feeling a rush of memories. Summer evenings on the porch. His quiet advice, the way he always made me feel, that no problem was too big if faced with calm resolve. That photo was more than just an image, it was my anchor. Loneliness crept in during those long nights. The house, once full of laughter and warmth, now echoed with the silence of strained relationships. My son's visits had become infrequent and filled with tension. He was caught in the middle, torn between his wife's harsh demands and his love for me. One evening, in the dim light of the kitchen, the silence broke. "Dad," he said, voice low but edged with frustration. "Maybe you're making things worse. Maybe you should just accept it, pack up and move on." His words stung, not because they were untrue, but because of the fear behind them. Fear that the family we once were was fracturing irreparably. I looked him in the eyes, steady and unwavering. I'm not ready to give up on this house. It's more than wood and nails to me, it's our history. While I wrestled with the emotional turmoil, the legal battle escalated. My daughter-in-law, emboldened by her apparent upper hand, sent more formal notices, threats, wrapped in legal jargon, attempting to intimidate me into surrender. Each envelope was a sharp knock at my door, a reminder that the fight was far from over. One afternoon, as I sifted through the growing mound of papers, a particular document caught my eye. It was official, bearing the unmistakable signature of a judge. The confirmation that the court had accepted my opposition to the eviction was both a relief and a call to arms. The battle had moved from whispered threats to formal proceedings, and the stakes had never felt higher. That night, my phone buzzed in the dark. Frank's voice came through, calm but serious. "The hearing date's been set, Merritt. This is the moment we've been preparing for." I felt a weight settle in my chest, heavy and cold as the winter night outside. The brass key in my pocket, its once pristine surface, now chipped and worn, from countless anxious twists between my fingers, felt heavier than ever. It was a symbol of everything I was fighting to protect, and yet it reminded me how fragile this fight could be. The world outside lay quiet beneath the falling snow, muffling sounds, blurring edges, waiting for what was to come. And so was I. The courtroom felt colder than any winter's day as I stepped inside, the brass key weighing heavily in my pocket. The old wooden benches and polished floors reflected a kind of solemnity that made the air seem thicker, almost harder to breathe. I glanced down at my hands briefly. They were steady, but I could feel a faint tremor deep within, part anticipation, part dread. The key, my ever-present companion through this ordeal, now bore a small crack clearly visible along its handle. It seemed to echo the fissures forming in my own voice, the strain of months of quiet resistance suddenly thrust into the harsh light of legal scrutiny. Spring 2018 in Madison had arrived, but here inside the Madison County Courthouse, the season's warmth was a distant memory. The court was a grand old building with wood paneling worn smooth by decades of cases, and the soft murmur of hushed conversations barely masked the tension simmering beneath. I was surrounded by faces both familiar and foreign, the judge grave and measured, the court staff efficiently moving between desks, my daughter-in-law, her sharp eyes burning with disdain, and my son sitting silently torn between his loyalty to me and his wife's relentless campaign. Frank, my steadfast mentor and legal counsel, sat beside me, whispering occasional words of reassurance and strategy. His calm presence was a balm against the storm that brewed within me. This was the moment I'd feared, and prepared for the legal battle that could either solidify my claim or shatter the fragile hold I had on my home. The proceedings began with opening statements. The opposing lawyer's voice was sharp, full of confident accusations and dismissal of my claims as sentimental nonsense. But when it was my turn, I spoke with a quiet conviction, recounting the history of the house, the significance of the brass key I carried, and the buried letter from my late father, a piece of evidence no one had expected. With deliberate care, I placed the brass key on the evidence table, its crack catching the courtroom's light. I then handed over the letter, its creased pages whispering secrets that had lain hidden too long. Frank explained the legal weight of these items, underscoring the depth of the case we were presenting. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the judge excused everyone for a recess, requesting time to review the evidence. I could hear whispered speculations from those around me, the weight of uncertainty pressing on every shoulder. As I left the courthouse for the day, my phone buzzed with a message from my son. It was brief but chilling. "This isn't over." The words hung in the air, a stark reminder that the fight extended beyond the courtroom walls. The cracked brass key now felt heavier still, a symbol of my precarious position, but also of the strength that kept me going. The legal battle was only beginning, but I was ready to face whatever came next. After hours of testimony, the truth began to emerge like a cautious sunrise through the tall courthouse windows, softening the rigid edges of the day's confrontation. The late afternoon light spilled gently across the wooden benches and polished floors, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the shifting moods within the courtroom. I noticed my coffee cup sitting quietly on the small table beside me, chipped at the rim, but still holding its warmth. That little imperfection somehow felt like a quiet act of perseverance, a reminder that even in the face of wear and hardship, there was still fullness left to hold on to. The courtroom atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken emotions. Faces once steely and resolute now showed cracks revealing deeper struggles beneath the surface. My daughter-in-law, whose cold determination had once seemed impenetrable, now appeared increasingly unsettled, her polished exterior beginning to falter under the weight of exposure. My son sat beside her, his expression clouded with doubt and inner turmoil, caught painfully between loyalty and the stirring recognition of a fractured truth. Frank took the floor with the steady confidence I had come to rely on, peeling back layers of financial strain and personal ambition that had driven the eviction attempt. He presented evidence of mounting debts and pressures that seemed to compel my daughter-in-law's harsh stance, not just against me, but against the very history and dignity of our family home. It was as if the courtroom walls themselves absorbed the unspoken sorrow and desperation behind these revelations. My son, after long silence, finally spoke. His voice trembled slightly as he admitted to harboring doubts about his parents' tactics. The strain of divided loyalties evident in every word. The admission hung heavily in the air, a pivotal moment that shifted the emotional balance of the day. I felt a flicker of hope amid the storm. Perhaps the truth could bridge the divide rather than deepen it. When my turn came, I shared quiet memories of my father, a man of kindness and quiet strength, whose generosity had shaped the very foundation of our home and family. Those memories stood in stark contrast to the cruelty that had surfaced in recent months, a testament to what was truly at stake beyond the legal arguments and paperwork. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as I spoke, the weight of history settling between us all. The judge, sensing the growing emotional intensity, called for a recess. The moment was charged, the outcome uncertain, but the stakes unmistakably high. As I gathered my things, my phone buzzed softly. A message from a local community group appeared, offering support and promising to attend the next hearing. It was a small but powerful reminder that I was not alone in this fight, a thread of solidarity weaving through the tension. The chipped coffee cup still sat there quietly, full as if waiting to carry me through the battles yet to come. The truth was unfolding, fragile but undeniable, and I knew the hardest moments were still ahead. The support from neighbors felt like a warm blanket wrapping around my weary shoulders, softening the sharp edges of a long, hard-fought battle. As summer stretched lazily across Madison, the days were filled not just with the heat of the season, but with a quiet, rebuilding hope that I hadn't felt in months. It was as if the community itself had taken my cause to heart, and that solidarity brought a strength I needed more than ever. In the corner of my kitchen, the coffee cup sat on the windowsill, now carefully repaired, and glued, its cracks still visible, but no longer a sign of brokenness. It was a small, unassuming symbol of healing, a quiet reminder that things could be mended if given enough patience and care. That little cup, once chipped and fragile, had become a daily metaphor for my journey, cracked but held together. The neighborhood meeting held at the local community center was more than just a gathering. It was a declaration. I watched familiar faces settle into the worn, wooden chairs, Amber, the diner waitress, who had quietly shown her support, Eleanor, a longtime neighbor with a gentle but fierce spirit, and many others who had come to listen and to stand alongside me. The topic was elder housing and tenant rights issues that struck close to home for all of us. I found myself speaking more confidently than I expected, sharing what I'd learned, the struggles I'd endured, and the hope for a future where seniors would be protected, not pushed aside. We agreed to organize a fund, a collective effort to help seniors facing eviction or discrimination. The idea felt bigger than me, a lifeline woven from many threads stretching far beyond my own story. The fund would become a beacon for those quietly struggling, a promise that no one should have to fight alone. My son came by that evening, his steps hesitant but determined. Our conversation was tentative, cautious, like the first brush of spring after a long winter. There was no need for grand declarations. The silence between words carried its own weight. He expressed hope for mending our fractured family ties, and I could feel the slow thaw of years of tension. We spoke of the future not as adversaries, but as family still learning how to walk together again. Later that night, as the house settled into quiet, I sat at the kitchen table and reached for the repaired coffee cup. My hands were steady as I lifted it, a small smile tracing my lips. In that moment, the cup was more than just a vessel. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of community, and to the quiet strength that had carried me this far. Just as I was about to set the cup down, the mail arrived. Among the usual bills and advertisements was a letter from the courthouse. The judge's decision, the culmination of all our efforts, was soon to be announced. My heart quickened, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension stirring within me. The next step was the most crucial, yet a moment that could change everything. As I stared out the window, the evening sun casting a warm glow over the maple trees lining the street, I felt a cautious optimism. Whatever the outcome, I was no longer alone. The cracks, the battles, the uncertainty, all were part of a story that had brought a community together, and somehow that made the future seem a little less daunting. The courtroom fell into a deep silence as the judge's voice filled the space, calm yet resolute. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this court hereby grants Mr. Merritt full ownership and legal rights to the property in question. The words echoed gently but firmly, a balm to years of struggle and uncertainty. Relief surged through me like a tide, unexpected yet deeply welcome. The weight I had carried, the fear of losing the home built by my father and preserved by my own hands, began to lift piece by piece. I reached into my pocket and drew out the brass key, now polished, meticulously gleaming under the soft courthouse lights. It was no longer just a key. It was a testament to resilience, a symbol of a hard-fought victory. I turned it slowly between my fingers, feeling the smoothness where once a small chip had marred its surface, like the healing scars of a long battle. Around me, family members exchanged glances. Quiet subdued, the sharp edges of conflict softened by the gravity of the moment. My daughter-in-law's usual condescension was absent, replaced by a fragile acceptance. My son, who had struggled to navigate between us, finally met my gaze with something approaching pride and reconciliation. The invisible walls that had once divided us seemed to tremble, perhaps even begin to crumble. When it was my turn to speak, I rose carefully, the weight of the room pressing in, yet buoyed by a surprising lightness within. "This isn't merely a personal victory," I said, voice steady but warm. "It's a stand for dignity, for respect for community. It's a reminder that we all deserve a place to call home, no matter our age or circumstance." I shared my vision for a local elder advocacy fund, a community initiative aimed at supporting seniors facing housing insecurity, preventing what I had endured from happening to others. Applause followed, soft but sincere, like the opening notes of a hopeful melody. Faces in the courtroom and beyond reflected something rare: solidarity, a collective resolve to protect the vulnerable. Friends, neighbors, even some strangers who had followed the case, nodded and smiled in encouragement. The scene shifted to the community center later that evening. Strings of warm lights crisscrossed the ceiling, casting a golden glow over familiar faces gathered in celebration. Laughter and quiet conversation mingled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee and homemade pies. Photographs from the courtroom and our neighborhood meetings adorned the walls, snapshots frozen in time that told the story of struggle and perseverance. Framed legal documents sat beside heartfelt letters from supporters, tangible proof of a journey no longer solitary. I sat at a worn wooden table, the brass key resting nearby, its polished surface catching the light like a beacon. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted my glass in a toast, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had stood with me through every twist and turn. "To new beginnings," I said softly, my voice carrying the weight of hope and renewal. The room raised glasses in unison, a chorus of warmth and promise. In that moment, the battles and bruises felt distant, replaced by the quiet comfort of community and connection. The repaired brass key symbolized more than victory. It embodied healing, the mending of broken bonds, and the strength found in standing together. As the evening waned, conversations drifted from legal victories to shared dreams, plans for workshops on tenant rights, social gatherings for seniors, and initiatives to foster understanding between generations. The celebration wasn't an end but a beginning, a stepping stone toward a future shaped by kindness and justice. Later, as I stepped outside into the cool night air, the streets of Madison lay peaceful beneath a canopy of stars. The familiar neighborhood, once a backdrop to conflict and pain, now felt like home once more. I held the key tightly, feeling its solidity, the smooth curve of metal that had opened not just doors but hearts. There was no grand finale, no dramatic flourish, just the quiet certainty that sometimes true victory comes in the form of peace restored. Relationships healed and a community united. The story of my fight was no longer mine alone. It was part of something greater, a shared journey toward dignity and belonging. And as I locked the door behind me, the key slid smoothly into the lock, turning with a satisfying click, a final confirmation that the house, the home, and the hope it represented were truly mine to keep. As the sun dipped low over the garden, the brass key rested quietly in my palm, its polished surface reflecting years of struggle and healing. That key, once chipped and worn, now felt like a quiet testament to resilience and the ties that bind us beyond blood and conflict. Life has a way of breaking things down, only to build something stronger in their place. Sometimes what feels like an ending is just a new beginning waiting to unfold. For anyone facing loss or hardship, remember justice and kindness often come hand in hand, guiding us toward unexpected second chances. Have you ever found hope where you least expected it?